It's been another week of testimonies at the Matlanga Commission and ad hoc committee hearings. Some highlights include a witness that testified that South Africa's criminal justice system was compromised, and this is because of the infiltration of criminal syndicates into the justice cluster. While Parliament's ad hoc committee in Cape Town, former police minister Bheki Cele called for lawmakers to urgently revisit the country's process of lawmaking. We further unpack this for you now with the senior lecturer at Wits School of Law, Dr. Shadi Maganoe. Thank you so much, Doc, for your time on the program this hour. It's always great to chat to you. So let's start with what the week has been. It's been a very busy one as far as the ad hoc committee as well as the Matlanga Commission. But in Parliament, the MK party claims that bias at the Matlanga Commission following implicated Gauteng acting judge President Aubrey Ledaba's demand to testify at a commission, and this is before another judge, to address bribery claims. They said there won't be fairness if a judge has to make a ruling against another judge. Just how tested are the systems that we are watching unfold right now?
In theory, I think South Africa has great laws in terms of combating corruption and also just looking at whether our justice system is viable and whether there won't be any biases. Theoretically speaking, I think our laws are great. We have great laws in place, but practically speaking, I think we've seen quite a lot of instances where we start to question these processes, not because the laws are not there, but because of the people who are involved. For instance, exactly what you just said about the acting judge and the accusations that were put against him in terms of the 2.5 million rand in the bail process, right? I think these kind of scandals erode public trust. So it's not about whether the law will take its course properly according to the laws that have been placed, but it's about the people who are going to action those laws or execute them. So in terms of whether the laws are great, definitely, I think our legal system is quite great in the way we've written our laws. But the practicality aspect of it, we're yet to see whether we can actually practice our laws and have the public believe that justice has been done or served.
Look, and I like that you touch on that important aspect of, people that have started to question the processes that are currently unfolding now, as well as, making a point on how the public trust is in a way also just being eroded by what we have potentially seen and unfold just going further. And Doc, just looking at the likes of the Matlanga Commission, for instance, moving the proceedings now to in camera, which was also warranted given the safety of some of the witnesses. You had the public coming out to say that, look, we were, hoping that this one will really do best when it comes to transparency, when it comes to accountability, when it comes to the entire nation actually being privy to everything that happens inside that room. What do you make of that?
I think it's a great thing that they're moving to now on-camera testimonies, because I think transparency is quite important because it speaks to what I said earlier about public trust, right? We want to see what is happening in there. In most instances, we get processes that are done outside or that are done on the side because of national security, right? And in those instances, we never get to hear what took place in that kind of process because of national security. So in this instance, I think it's important that the government takes the public into its confidence by showing us step by step what is happening in there. And I think maybe to a certain extent, it may just improve the public trust, because at this point, I think the public is at a point where we don't trust the institutions that are put in place to protect us, because what is being revealed in both the commission and the ad hoc committee shows that the people we have elected to represent us and represent our interests cannot be trusted, because they, instead of protecting us, we are now hearing that we are actually not protected. So I think that's very important, and it speaks to just trying to get back to, or just trying to recover the public trust that they may have lost in us.
And interestingly, part of having these processes unfold is, that all those allegations, is so that all those allegations can actually be tested, right? So let's zoom into what we saw come out of the ad hoc committee, where General Mkhwanazi retracted allegations at the committee against the former police minister Bheki Cele, accusing Cele of providing Vusumuzi Matlanga his banking details, for instance, and that alleged payment that we've now established that never happened. So was this hearsay, or how should the commission rather move around this? And this is to ensure that, when the witness come to the committee or the commission, put their best foot forward. And when I say best foot forward, I mean they tell the truth and nothing but the truth as best as they know how.
True. So when witnesses appear either before a commission of inquiry or an ad hoc parliamentary committee, they do so under oath, right? Meaning they are legally bound to tell the truth. Why? Simply because their testimonies can expose corruption, maladministration, or weaknesses in the government system. Also, those testimonies can basically speak to whether policy is changed. So the evidence that they give forward needs to be very accurate, of course, to the best of their knowledge, but they're doing so under oath. So lying under oath is a serious offense. In most instances, it's perjury, right? So this can lead to criminal prosecution, right? So these hearings are important because they help uncover the truth and promote accountability, and also just strengthen our legislative oversight or our democratic oversight. So every witness that stands or that sits before either the commission or the ad hoc committee needs to do so truthfully, because whatever evidence they give could actually impact policy in the future, or it could lead to prosecutions against whoever that evidence has been made against. So that retraction, I think, was important, but I think it also it probably speaks to the credibility of the witness. But I think by retracting, that was very important, because they probably remembered that I'm under oath and I need to give the information that is most accurate to the best of my ability or my knowledge.
Yeah. And, speaking of processes as well as, credibility of processes, I want us to also touch on the operations there at SAPS, where we heard the former minister talk about just how there was the communication or a lack thereof between him as well as his successor, Senzo Mchunu, particularly when he spoke about a handover. Because, in a general sense, we'd expect that particularly when someone is handing over a portfolio as important as the police portfolio to another minister, there would be communication. There would be, thorough communication to ensure that everything, goes through the checks and balances as a handover as well. Now, Mr. Cele spoke about how there was no communication, and subsequently we saw the cracks seeping in within operations there at SAPS. What does this point to, and what would your assessment of this be?
I think the lack of communication basically speaks to the cracks in the structure of the whole the policing system, right? Because when you move from one position to the next, you need to do a proper handover. So if a proper handover wasn't done, it speaks to basically what was not being exposed or what wasn't being communicated. Could this have led to the erosion of accountability, and also just the culture of impunity that we are seeing that is being exposed in the commission and the ad hoc committee? I think so. The lack of communication was very telling to just how porous our borders are in terms of accountability in that instance, right? Criminals were allowed to get away with a lot. And this is because there was a lack of communication, there was no handover, which means there was no accountability, right? And now we are sitting with a commission, and we know how commissions end in South Africa, right? We're going to hear all of these testimonies and what is going to happen in the end. So that lack of handover and the lack of communication is probably the reason why we're sitting here, because to a certain extent, it starts to look like things were being hidden, hence there was no proper handover. And now, whoever found what they found is the reason why we're sitting in this position in the first place.
And, still on that point of accountability, most South Africans, even just across the board, the sense is that, not another commission, not another committee, because they're looking at the impact that those commissions might have and the weight that they hold, just moving forward insofar as ensuring accountability and ensuring that all those that are found to be guilty of wrongdoing are brought to book. What sense are you getting insofar as this is concerned? What do you make of these statements that South Africans are actually tired of commissions?
I think it's valid, right? Why? If you look at all the commissions we've had over the years, for example, Life Esidimeni, and then the current one, which was state capture, what came out of those? There were findings that were made, but no one was prosecuted. Let's use state capture as an example, where government officials were found to have looted state resources, right? What happened to those people? So I think when South Africans say not another commission, because remember, this is coming out of the taxpayer's pocket. So it's basically us funding all of these commissions, but nothing ever really comes out of them. So I understand why most South Africans would say not another commission, right? Because if it's just another commission and we hear revelations, but there's no action, what is the point of another commission? And I think maybe this probably stems from the way our legal system is structured or the way our constitution is structured, right? Remember, commissions come from the president, right?
Yeah.
So whatever comes from those commissions goes through the president. Most of the allegations that are being made in this commission are basically allegations against members of the executive. Now ask yourself, if you get a report and it has findings, it has damning findings against you as a member of the executive, are you going to want to hold yourself accountable? So I think the way our legal system is structured is one of the reasons why we probably never end up with action, and it's mostly always revelations. We find out all of these things, but nothing has been done. So it's valid to say most South Africans are at a point where they feel like not another commission, and we're tired of these commissions because nothing ever comes out of them. We just hear all of this evidence and nothing is ever done.
And ultimately, the president is the head of state, and so many questions as well arise around, these inquiries, because they're not just about the ministers themselves, but are also about the president's role and how much he might have been privy to and how much he let go through, which is why the country finds itself in this position in the first place.
Exactly, which would then go back to what I was saying about the way our the way our law is structured, right? In my opinion, I think the executive has too much power, and then we have this interconnected relationship between the legislature and the executive. Remember, ministers or members of the executive come from parliament, so that relationship creates a barrier for parliament to hold the executive accountable, right? That's, I think, where the problem comes from. And in that instance, we're going to find ourselves in the same position over and over and over. And not because what the president is doing is wrong. Legally speaking, the constitution gives him all of these powers, right? And with this power, I think that's where the I don't want to say abuse, but the misuse of the power comes from, right? So every time we hear allegations of corruption, the president will at the time just convene a commission of inquiry. Once that's done, nothing comes out of it, right? Because he does have the authority to call for a commission of inquiry. What happens thereafter, we have no idea. The proper process would be that he takes this information to Parliament so Parliament can hold those who have been found to have committed any form of corruption to be held accountable. But that's not what happens in most instances, because that report from the commission goes to the president and he gets to decide as the head of the executive, right? And this is why I'm saying our legal system, to a certain extent, is flawed. and we need to look at those powers of the executive. It may take a long time, but I think we need to start there.
And you make a very important point around what really should happen next, which was going to be my next question, Doc. Just how far should these commission sanctions go? For example, should ministers get fired if found wanting, or other methods to improve government? Because, once all these commissions come and go, there's a sense that, they are all bark and no teeth, right? And so then what should happen going forward? Because serious reform is needed for the democracy that we are in.
True. I think ministers should be seen as custodians of public trust, apart from members of parliament or apart from parliament, right? So if there's credible evidence of corruption against a minister, they should step aside. They should either be suspended or they should be fired, right? If you're found guilty, you must definitely be fired or you must be removed. And face the legal consequences. So it's not just you being removed from your position. You must be removed and you must face legal consequences for whatever you've been found guilty of. So allowing implicated leaders to remain in office sends a message that corruption is tolerable or it's tolerated in South Africa, which is why in most instances we're seen as a lawless country, because people commit crimes and then they are rewarded with another position in parliament or in the executive, either or. But in most instances, what we see is if you are accused or if you're found to have committed any form of government maladministration or if you have misused state funds, you're just moved from one position and you're moved to the next one, which is very problematic, right? So if you are found guilty, you should be removed and you should face legal consequences. You should go through the whole process so that we can see, so that we can see that no one is above the law in South Africa and the rule of law is actually there to protect all of us.
Speaking to that top-down approach, because the sense is that, Doc, as you're saying there, rightfully putting it, that, there's a sense across the board that we have a government that rewards bad behavior, and now a need moves towards, sending a strong message, particularly where accountability is concerned. But I must thank you so much for your insights this morning. That's Senior Lecturer at Wits School of Law, Dr. Shadi Maganoe, chatting to us about all of those developments coming out of the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee as well as the Matlanga Commission. Thanks so much indeed for your insights.